Three, two, one, and we're live. My name is Maveo Heimuli, and this is another episode of the VillageMade podcast. I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors, C4 Designs. It's a clothing company on a mission to keep our beautiful Nisian culture alive. Go to C4 Designs, c4dzynz.com. Use code VMP15 at checkout to get 15% off your purchases. Today, we have a special guest from the village, Lupe Funaki. Thank you. I appreciate the time. And I guess for me, just starting off, I watched the project that you did with VillageMade brand. And because of that, and watching the stories that you guys were, the project and from all the females and all those who participated, I was inspired. And because of that, I knew I wanted to reach out and, just have a conversation with you, not only to learn from you, but also to share your story. And also, I'm sure other people will learn from it as well. So I appreciate you being kind with your time to be here today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
But to get into it, let's begin with your name, the story of your name, who named you, and the meaning of your names.
My full name is Lupe Lotomua Mautohi Funaki, and the name Lupe, there's actually several Lupes in the family. Most specifically, I'm named after my dad's youngest sister, who is Lupe, and from what I understand, she lived there with my parents maybe close to when I was born. She had spent some time with them and had requested that I be named after her. And I'm actually very happy. She's a strong woman who's very faithful to her family, to her religion, and I've learned a lot from her example.
And do you know the meaning of your last name? Does it have a meaning, or is it just a family name?
It's a family name that I'm convinced has some Japanese connection, but my dad says no, there's none. It's just, I think some of his mannerisms could be linked to Japanese culture, but really we don't know any connection other than just the family.
Yeah, awesome. And where in Tonga, I guess, what villages are your families from?
So my father comes from Ewa, and my mother her birth parents are from Hakame, and she was adopted by an uncle and raised in Mua. And so I claim both because she was raised in Mua, where we claim as home when we go to visit in Tonga, but I think my personality takes after the Hakame family a lot.
That's awesome. I know my grandpa remarried his wife is from Hakame, so.
Oh, good.
I know some Hakames.
Good.
Shout out to the Hakames.
Happy, lively village, yes.
Yes. And for you, where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Provo, Utah, while my father finished his graduate studies at BYU. And not too long after I was born, he had a job offer at BYU, Hawaii. And so I think just before I turned 1, he moved there and started working, teaching psychology at BYU, Hawaii. And that's where I was raised and lived for many years.
So what was childhood like for you? Being raised in Hawaii? What was childhood like?
Oh, paradise. I only have positive memories, which I look fondly on and miss those days because the community was very close. We had a lot of community events. A lot of the holidays had some kind of community gathering. That was still when Laie was one stake from Hauula to Kahuku. And we had parades, we had roller skating parties. I remember there being carnivals when I was young, and we were just very close. It was like we were kind of our own little country. And ice cream was 25 cents, 50. Does that put an age on me? And I remember when it went up to 75 cents at the BYU Hawaii Seasider, we were like, it's so expensive. So those were some really wonderful times where the families that lived in the community were a big part of the university community as well as the Polynesian Cultural Center. So for better or for worse, everybody knew each other. When you did good, the whole family village supported, and when you did bad, your mom was going to find out one way or another because it was just a very close-knit community.
Dang. I remember some of those, going to the Seasider as well and getting ice cream from them.
Yeah.
That's some awesome memories. Growing up, I guess, what were some of the Tongan traditions? Maybe some etiquettes or some customs that you were taught?
Yeah.
That your parents raised?
That's a great question because I think Laie itself, where I grew up as a young girl, had its own culture. It was very family oriented. The university played a big part in that, and of course the PCC. But in my own private home, it was very clear that we were still Tongan. And part of that was because the Tongan language was still spoken. My extended family, we had aunts and cousins who also visited frequently or even lived with us for periods of time. My grandparents came from Tonga often and spent months living with us. And so Tongan was still spoken mostly at home. English was our first language growing up, but it was very common to have both of the languages going. So I'm not sure that I actually connected some of the family traditions we developed growing up at home as Tongan. I think my naivety thought that all families kind of did that. But as I got older, I realized, oh, this is a Tongan cultural thing. For example, religiously, Tongan people are very religious, regardless of what denomination. Everyone prays, everyone fasts. And so in our home, being a Tongan home, religion was observed a bit more strictly than perhaps outside of our home, I learned. And so on Sundays, we wore dresses all day, just as a sign of respect. Respect was also highlighted as a very important quality. So you could discuss how you felt at school or with friends, but once you came home, it was, you're Tongan. I don't want to hear your opinion right now. You just take notes. You're the child. Those who are older also, we were taught to give respect. And so we showed that, and we're taught to show that by being obedient to whatever they may ask us to do. And so.
I know you mentioned the gospel.
Yes.
Was the gospel and education an important aspect growing up, and was it taught to you guys?
Absolutely, yes. And I think coming from Tonga, my parents were especially committed to giving us the best education possible with their support, alleviating us of time and perhaps some traditional Tongan responsibilities that we probably would have been involved in, they carried for us or did on our behalf so that we could spend time with school and other programs available at school. Sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, if you wanted to talk about the migration of why your parents, or whether it was your parents or grandparents that ended up in Hawaii from Tonga? Right. It was my parents. So they came because of the scholarship opportunity from Tonga to study at BYU Hawaii when it was still Church College of Hawaii. And they came on that scholarship program and went back to Tonga and worked for a while before my mother encouraged my father to try and pursue a graduate degree because she saw he was very diligent in his studies and she saw the value of that. So they came back for his graduate work, and when the opportunity came to work at BYU Hawaii, he felt that was the right thing. So we've lived there, but they have never forgotten that they came because of the education opportunity. And so naturally, that was a priority in our home, and any Tongan who came to go to BYU Hawaii or became a part of that community some way, my parents were very supportive because they believed that the Lord had put them there to support others in their education as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, just going off of what you're saying about supporting, when I was in high school coming up at Koku, your dad did a class for SAT prep that some of, me and a few other people, took part in. And so I think that's kind of cool that, for him to want to give back or help others along, and education especially because he was a professor there. And so he, I passed the SAT and I went to college. So in part, thanks to him for helping me prep for the SAT,
He would be happy to hear.
So that's cool that you mentioned that.
Yeah, he would be very happy to hear that.
Yeah. For you, what makes you proud to be Tongan, or your inheritance and your culture?
Well, I think when you are raised in Hawaii, where so many represent so many different ethnicities, it's rather common to be part Hawaiian, Chinese, Japanese, Tongan, Samoan. And I grew up thinking that was cool. So when I was young, going to La'i Elementary, I thought it was so boring to be just Tongan. And I don't think I really fully appreciated it until I was older and had my own experiences where I was the only Tongan. And then the strengths of that culture gave me deeper appreciation when I was not necessarily one of many Tongans, but I was in a setting where people would actually say to me, "You're what? What's that?" And I had an opportunity to try and articulate what a Tongan was, as if I really knew. But I think it wasn't until I was really getting into high school that I realized that being Tongan for me meant, number one, that you put God first, that God was a part of your life wherever you went. Being Tongan also meant that you had family. And I'm emotional thinking about all the family that was very supportive through my upbringing. Family that you may not have even known very well, but that connection was enough for them to want to support you in whatever good effort you might want to try. For me, as a young girl, I was very ambitious. I don't know that I would say I was competitive, because whether I was number 1 or number 5 or number 50 didn't matter to me as much as I was drawn to have experiences that I believed were good and exciting and uplifting. And so I actually begged my parents for opportunities that were outside of the normal experience of a young girl in Laie. That's what took me to sign up to do pageants, to do talent competitions, and eventually to audition for a musical play that was all the way down in Honolulu. Well, being as young as I was, I had no idea what it took to support a child who had that kind of ambition and desire. I really had no idea. I just thought it was something good, and I begged for the opportunity, and I was willing to work. And so my poor parents humbly tried to find the resources to make those things happen for me. And that's when I ventured out of the community to try these new experiences. When I was in elementary, we'd never really heard about pageants,
Right.
That's definitely not a Tongan thing. But I had seen some people come back from the pageants, and they were role models who I thought held themselves well, who articulated, spoke well. And so I begged my dad to please let me try this. They had no experience, but they thought, okay, if it's going to be a good thing. So when I did, the community came out of the village to support me in these activities that I, had tried to do. Fortunately, at, that young age, I was able to see a little bit success. I won a couple of them. And so at a very young age, I felt the community because they literally came from Laie to wherever that performance was to support me. And when I was, maybe it was fourth or fifth grade, I remember I won Miss Hawaii National Preteen, and maybe I was 11 going on 12. That was a long time ago. And the elementary school, at Laie Elementary School, held an assembly to just give me support before I went on the national pageant. Wow. So at a young age in elementary, I had come to feel this village support. When I went to the national pageant, which was in Orlando, Florida, first time off the rock, first time in a big competition with 50 other contestants, I never forgot that little assembly, just over the portable building with all the other students on the grass, basically just giving their support to me. And when the pageant was over, I didn't win a single thing. And I remember just bawling and telling my mom, what am I going to tell my friends? I didn't win anything. I don't have anything to take back. And she tried to comfort me and reassure me, it's okay, you're still a winner, they tell you those kind words. But I had felt very heavily within myself that I had this huge team back at home that was cheering for me, and I felt this obligation to give back. Well, I never won anything at that pageant. I came back and my friends were still my friends. But what I learned was, and I saw consistently throughout my life, was that Laie village never forgets you. And I feel that support has always been there, whether I won a prize or not. And that's always given me a lot of courage to try things that are hard, to get through the hard part of some of those goals that we set for ourselves. And that has always stayed with me no matter how old I've been. And I hope to contribute back. I'm always trying to contribute back here and there in little ways, but I'm not even sure what the original question was. I got
Don't worry.
sidetracked.
Man, that was an awesome experience. And that's what this is, the village that we're talking about. Going back to, the name of this podcast is the VillageMade podcast. And so,
because we were talking about being Tongan.
And the Tongan.
Okay, so Tongan is family. So there was definitely that village support with the community, but my family has always been there also. Yeah.
So growing up, was it difficult for you to find your identity? I kind of feel like with these experiences of you always wanting to step out or be different, and your parents support and the community support, was it a difficult thing finding identity?
For me, it was. I don't think it has to be, but I think my personality was so curious that I was not necessarily limited. My ambitions were not necessarily limited to what was culturally common. I had the personality that would look across and see, hey, what's that? That looks fun. So my parents signed me up for tap dance. Hey, what's that? Signed me up for jazz dance. Now I was coming back, going to Honolulu for jazz dance. I mean, who does jazz in Laie? That was like crazy. And especially in Tonga, even now, you go to Tonga, nobody knows what jazz dance is.
Right.
So they were trying to find the leg warmers and what kind of shoes and what kind of, these were all new experiences. And I think the way I saw it was that I'm Tongan. What I do is still Tongan. But what I think made my identity crisis a lot more heightened and challenging than it had to be was because of my passion for learning things that were outside of my bubble. I'd come home and bring back these things I would learn outside, and my mother would say, "What are you doing? Tongan girls don't do that. Tongan girls don't say that. Tongan girls don't sit like that. Tongan girls," and that was very strong in her trying to help shape how I was bringing these experiences back. So I'd bring back the dress style. I'd bring back even the perspectives were so different from what my mother had grown up with that we were constantly at conflict. Tongan girls don't do that. This is what Tongan girls do. Do not talk, because Tongan girls don't say, and I was so frustrated by that because everything that I was drawn to that would influence what I liked, what I started doing, clashed with what was traditionally Tongan for a girl. And it was okay to be educated, but I came back with some wild ideas that my mom would just be like, "You are a Tongan girl." And at the end of the day, remember. So I think my identity conflict came from me saying, "What? I don't get it." But I like that. I want to learn that. I was drawn to these different experiences that I believed were good. And not that the experiences were bad, but I had a hard time having those different experiences and then coming back to traditionally a conservative home, which I understand better now, especially having lived in Tonga for a few years. The most honorable, noble thing for a Tongan girl is to know your duty at home. Please don't discuss your outside opinions. Leave that for when you go outside. When you come home, it's family first. It's your home responsibilities. It's the family relationships. That becomes first and foremost. And I had a hard time with that. I'd come home from dance lessons and I would clear out the living room and I'd put on my dance shoes and I'd practice cartwheels, splits, leaps, turns in the living room. Not how to cook and not read a book and, learn. So I think I was just a challenging child who had so much energy, and then I didn't know how to put it in its proper place. So as I got older, not only that, I truly loved other cultures. I absolutely loved the diversity and the variety of culture and people. I was drawn to that. And so I didn't think it was so bad to borrow, this culture does that well and this culture does that well. And Hawaii just has almost every representation. It's okay, except when I come home, it was like, you've got to leave that there. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do that, to come and be the Tongan daughter, conservative, obedient, submissive. I was everything opposite from that. So my identity was challenging. And I want to say it was until I was in college. And I was so frustrated. One day I just, kind of let out to my dad. And I said, it's not fair. You guys tell me I can't do this and I can't do that, but you still want me to. And my dad, very simply just said, "Lupe, it's like having different hats. And you just need to know, it's not that that's bad. You just need to know when to put the right hat on. And when you're home with your mother, you need to know how to put that hat on." And I still think it's something I have to work on refining, but I think I understand better. And when I look back on my life, I'm really grateful she didn't give up trying to teach me what it means to be a Tongan girl, to be humble, to know your place, to know your responsibility. I think that's been the anchor
And I've been able to enjoy these different experiences and even different people from different countries and cultures. I think I've enjoyed them more because I've had a very strong base of my Tonganness. I just didn't realize it was in me. But everything I've gone to has always come back to God and family. And then you work from there.
I guess going off of the saying, when you were talking about coming home to a conservative Tongan home, and then when you went out into the world, into your daily life, you would explore who you were, and trying to find out who you were. With the Tongan culture and the American culture, is there a balance?
I think there is. I think it's not always written out in black and white, but I do think there's room for that. I think it comes with time and experience and knowing yourself and then understanding the appropriate boundaries. But I like to think of my experience, my personality naturally is like what we will stereotype as the Democratic Party ideals. I was very liberal, very open to almost any new experience. It's like, yeah, sure, go ahead, let's try it. I was game, very adventurous and curious. My Tongan culture kind of kept me rooted in what I sort of like to say was like the conservative Republican. And so I had this energy to want to just, be everywhere. But it was balanced by this culture that was very cautious, conservative, as we've said. And I think when we have experiences in life, if we continue to stay open to what those life lessons are, it eventually helps us find that balance of these different extremes. I don't think one is better than the other. I think we work with what we have and we can grow within that, and our circle of influence expands when we know how to find that balancing act. And so for me, being a Tongan living in America is probably very ideal, because the American dream is truly the concept that you can be whatever you want. You can work for that. Whatever you're willing to really work at, you can be successful. And I was drawn to that ideal. I'm a believer. I'm a dreamer that this country truly offers that opportunity. The Tongan mentality is because your birthright is defined by not only who you're born to, but where in the family you are born. Tongan culture is very structured in knowing your place. That brings a lot of unity, and it brings a lot of clarity for what your place is and order. And when we submit to that social structure willingly, oh my goodness, the synergy is amazing. If you consider the family, in a Tongan family, from the traditional perspective, boys have a role, girls have a role. Husbands have a role, wives have a role. And in the Tongan culture, you don't mess it up. You don't say, well, I was just thinking. No, you just don't. Right. And they don't fight it. They don't question. They don't analyze it up, down, backwards, up, the yin yang. Tongans are very happy accepting that natural order. That's a beautiful thing. And you can appreciate that if you've lived in a country that can be as free as America, and you almost lose that order. You lose that boundary when, so that was me, the firecracker all over the place, saying, oh, I want to try this, I want to try that. And at some point it's like, okay, that's all right, but what are you actually building, Lupe? You're doing a lot of things, but what's your foundation? And that, a Tongan doesn't have to have $1 million to live the happiest life. They just don't. So while you can have the American dream in America, that Tongan root gives a base where at some point you can say, I am happy with what I have. And we don't become so greedy saying, oh, but I could make $1 million more if I did this. You learn at some point, you work hard. Hey, I want to try and own my own home. I want to try and buy my own car. I want to try and be a successful company owner. We're in a country that says, go for it. But then the Tongan culture is that Republican conservative voice that also says, okay, where's your family? Where's your testimony? Where's your faith with God? How are your relationships in your village, in your family? And if any of those things at home base are out of balance, the Tongan culture in us has taught us to say, does the money really matter that much?
Right.
Does that castle house really matter that much? And that's where we can kind of be like, oh, I tried, but I think I'm going to stick with this. And what matters most is what I feel my Tongan culture has helped me to stay rooted in. And so having both, absolutely, that's the perfect ideal.
Dang. That's that goes deep. That's cool.
Sorry.
No worries. That's man.
Connector. Sorry.
I guess with the sacrifice that your dad and your mom made to move to America and migrate to live the American life, I guess have the American dream, would they be proud of who you are and the sacrifices they made?
I laugh because I think I'm still in the making of making sure that they are comfortable that their investments have been well used. I mentioned that I started raising my family in Laie. I was working at BYU Hawaii. Prime work opportunity because I was mentored by some of our pioneers of good old Laie and even BYU Hawaii. My first job at BYU Hawaii was working as an international advisor. The director at the time was Charlie Gu, and the other two who served in the office with him were Mari Paongo and also Hank Nawahine. They all have incredible pioneer roots in the community. Right. And it was so ideal for me because they were coming with years of not only life experience, but professional experience and family experience, raising families. And they brought all that experience. And because they knew I was from the community, they invested everything to train me and help me grow professionally. I still look at those days as the golden years of my work experience. But I feel like I'm still in the process of taking that mentorship, taking what my parents have started for me and trying to get myself to a place where I'm contributing back more actively. I've moved several times with my children. My children are still young. And so I feel like I'm still in the making of hopefully building on what they gave me. And I want to say, that they would be happy that I took advantage of a lot of the opportunities here to not only go to school and get education, but also work experience. But I hope that in the few years coming up, that not only myself, that I can really be settled in a place to show long-term success perhaps in those investments, but also that my children will show that they're following in the same path. My father has said,
in many family gatherings that the measure of his success is not going to be from what I become, but from what his grandchildren become. So I sort of chuckle because on one end, I think they're kind of happy that I'm not this firecracker, going all over the place that they have to try and pull down and keep anchored on the ground. But I think that pressure is still there for them because now they want to make sure their grandchildren are moving in the same direction. And sometimes I think that's more stressful to me than my own experience trying to get through school. So when the grandkids, aren't engaged or growing in good activities, their grandma gets on me. Both grandmas. And that's a good pressure. But I think that's going to be when they will decide if I've really made the most of their investment is going to be how I'm able to teach my children.
Yeah.
I still have a ways to go.
I guess we're all working on that, right?
Yeah.
Man. So now that's awesome. I want to get into just being in the education and being educated.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does your dad have, came to Hawaii to get education and be educated, but I wanted to talk about your journey as well, going to Punahou. Yeah. I know you went to Punahou. Mm-hmm. And so what was that like? Or how, was that also part of, I remember you mentioned earlier that you just wanted, to experience all these different and new things. Mm-hmm. And was that part of wanting to experience new things, was wanting to go to Punahou? And who came up with the idea?
So I had participated in a musical play called Annie at the Honolulu Community Theater. And some of the other kids who were in that play with me were students at Punahou. And so that's what had introduced us to the school. And I learned that they had a dance program there at the school. I had no idea what the costs were or anything. And even if I did see the numbers, I don't think I even understood what it meant. I just saw that there was a dance school. These kids were incredibly independent. I remember in between rehearsals, they were doing homework. I mean, they were just very disciplined. And I was so impressed with that. So, of course, I was like, I want to try that. I've always believed in the value of education, but I'm not a book smart person at all. I just like making friends with smart people, and then they help get me through it. So I was attracted to their work ethic. And my parents saw that there was a lot of good, and so they supported me. So my Punahou experience was actually quite interesting. I was very drawn to a lot of the good work ethic that I saw and admired in some of the girls that were in this musical play with me in Honolulu. And so when I went to school there on trial for the first year, I saw that they just operated very differently. These young students were very independent and drawn to very serious preparation for their futures. And so as much as I enjoyed that environment and felt inspired by the learning opportunities, socially and identity-wise in me, I realized that Tongan identity that I thought was so boring, actually, I realized was a lot more ingrained in me than I realized. So when I wasn't involved with school programs or extracurricular, I was anxious to get back home. I didn't want to stay. I was not as interested in the social activities at school as much as I was anxious to get back home to my family, whatever old-fashioned ways, whatever. And even with our humble circumstances, many of the students who attend Punahou are quite affluent. Their parents do very well in their careers. And so they have a lot of money to spend on their child's success. And I could see
The joke was that all these nice BMWs, I didn't even know what a BMW was or a Mercedes until I went to Punahou. And when I would wait for my ride, it was funny that you'd see all these nice cars pull in to pick up their students, and then I could hear my car before I saw it. But the money didn't matter to me. I was missed very much the home environment and the cultural style that I grew up with in Laie. And I remember even getting to, a junior, senior around prom time and hoping that someone from Kahuku would ask me to prom, so that, that was the prom I seemed to worry more about going to than my own school prom. But culturally, identity, I'd come to recognize that who I was as a Tongan was something I couldn't escape, and that there were a lot of characteristics of that culture that I absolutely loved. And it was not attached to how smart I was. It wasn't attached to how pretty or how fancy your dress is or how much money you have. It was really about relationships. And so I'm grateful for my Punahou experience, for what it taught me. But I'm also grateful for what I learned to appreciate about my own upbringing at home in Laie.
Man, when assimilating into Punahou, was it difficult for you coming from public school, maybe Kahuku, and trying to fit into the program at Punahou? Or was that an easy transition? And did you ever feel like giving up at any point?
Because I think when I was in Laie Elementary, I was always fascinated with some of the opportunities outside. I think I was just kind of the same, like quite ignorant. You don't know what you don't know. Right. And I just went in there with, okay, well, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. And I don't recall worrying too much about what other people said or thought. I just kind of did my thing and jumped in where I could. And when it worked out, great. And when it didn't, okay, try harder. I was very much involved in the music program. That's always been one of my first loves, is music. I also did dance. And then I did volleyball in high school as well. And so I stayed busy, and the quality or the expectation for high quality performance at that school was so high that I think I was just always so busy doing my best to reach that level, whatever it was, that kept me busy. I didn't worry about anybody else except me. And then when the day was over, I couldn't wait to get back home. And both of those, it was like literally, it was like living in two different worlds, but they fulfilled me in different ways. And so I feel like I had a lot to appreciate and a lot to do. And really my focus was just, okay, how do I make the most of what I have before me?
Shout out to Punahou, the
Go
Buff and Blue.
Puns.
I know I mentioned in my podcast earlier, my sister going to Punahou, and so I can relate to
Yes.
your journey and also her journey going to Punahou. But when you were at Punahou, was the end goal always to go to college? And did you end up going to college?
Yes, always. But I don't think that was because of Punahou. Okay. I think that was because of home.
Yeah.
Whether we, I think we grew up just knowing college was going to be part of our plan. Didn't matter if we thought we were smart or not. I don't even remember thinking, okay, only smart people go to college. We were raised, this is what you're going to do. And for me, I think because I was so ambitious at a young age, I think my parents, and gratefully, felt they needed to put some of those plans in place to help guide me. I'm sure they saw, now that I have kids, of course I go, oh my goodness, I'm gonna get payback with my own kids who are energetic and have these big ambitions. But my parents were they were very wise, and I think they saw that energy in me and sort of helped point me in directions to help me make sure the things that would give me more longevity in my life and stability were in there. I think without that, I would have lived life like a bouncing ball, not always clear of an outcome. But early on, my parents helped me actually write that plan out, for better or for worse. And a Tongan girl, a Tongan daughter, is going to humbly submit and obey. And so between my conflicts of wanting to explore things on my own and my parents trying to keep me rooted, I did agree to a very clear and simple plan quite early in my youth. I want to say even as early as 7th grade. It was clear to me I was going to go to college, major in English. I didn't even know what that meant. I was going to serve a mission for the church, and then I was going to go to law school. Law school. I mean, saying it, I could say it with, in how many different languages, but I had absolutely no clue what I was saying. But the Tongan side was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't know. Your mom and dad are telling you this is a good thing, so you need to obey. And for me, trying to keep the peace, because I did love my family very much. I did trust my parents. I actually would work on trying to get my heart to be in the same place to want that. And so I'm grateful. Like I said, it's finding the best of the Democratic and Republican ideals. And I definitely needed that. Otherwise, it's hard for me to believe that I would have finished. I know we talked about it, but I think without having that simple plan, I might have still been bouncing around somewhere in Europe or China or something, who knows what. But that plan gave me an anchor to follow.
And did you follow up with that dream?
I did.
You go to college and then law school?
I did.
Wow.
I went
to school and law school?
BYU, Hawaii for my undergrad.
And
Loved
did you do
it.
English?
I did.
Oh, that's
You
crazy.
would not have known I was an English major. Because like I said, I am not a book smart person. The smartest thing I did was make friends with smart people. And I would, they would study and I would try and study. And then I had to take my social breaks because I was a social person. And that's where my hakame blood, I say, comes in. So I did. I went to BYU Hawaii, majored in English. And part of the way I rationalized it in my mind was I'm going to be obedient and major in English.
Also, English was something that your parents told you to major in?
Yes.
Or is that what you wanted?
Oh, no.
Wow.
You won't catch me sitting down reading a novel in the corner of the house somewhere, unfortunately. I read because I have to read. Or I have, if I have a question that I'm passionate about, then now I will. Because I'm older, I've read, I've been through a lot of school, but naturally, you will never find me reading. I would check out books all the time because smart people check out books from the library, right? But then they would sit there and I never read it. And then the due date would come and I'd be like, oh my goodness, okay, I'll try again. Go renew the book. No, never got read. So I majored in English because they said, but to satisfy what I wanted personally, I had my music. So I did the BYU choir, I was in Showcase Hawaii, and then I danced at the Polynesian Cultural Center. And that's what helped balance what I felt was kind of the long-term roots my parents were trying to give me. I did go on a mission, as the plan said, and I accredit my acceptance to law school to the Lord's hand in giving me that opportunity. I was on a mission when I received my acceptance letter to law school. Wow. And so that's why I always tell my kids, never underestimate the Lord. You might not be smart enough, but he might give you an opportunity if you keep believing. So after my mission, I came home and—
Where did you serve? Sorry.
Micronesia, Guam.
Okay.
Yakwe.
Yakwe,
And came to BYU and started law school. And after my first year, it was the worst school year of my life. My first semester in law school was so bad, they sent me a letter saying, we don't think you belong here. We're going to give you one more semester, and if you don't make it, we're going to have to let you go out of the program. Wow. And so because I'd never been kicked out in my life before, I hustled to not get kicked out and basically did whatever it took to survive and thought, I don't need to be a straight A student. I just need to get just to the top. And that's how I survived law school. But it was so awful that I was looking for a different program that I felt was more my fit. And that's when I applied for a master's in public administration. By the time I started that program, because I thought, I need something that works with people, not as much reading, even though I majored in English. Right. And when I got into public administration, I think I appreciated more because that first year in law school was so horrible. And by the time I finished that first year in the public administration, I realized not every Tongan girl gets an opportunity to sit in a law classroom. And so from that point on, it was my goal to not get kicked out. And I decided I was going to just keep trying my best and not get kicked out of law school. And if I make it, great. And if I don't make it, well, I'll finish this other program. I'm just going to do my best. So in 2000, I was able to crawl across the finish line with a degree that is considered a joint degree with both a Juris Doctor and a public administration.
That's awesome.
And I was pretty brain dead after that. But, it's all perspective. Now I realize how much that helped me grow. When you're experiencing mental growth, it's hard sometimes to see it happening because you can't touch it. You can't see it. Not like when we have physical goals, either to lose weight or to grow taller or to gain weight. We can see those things. But mental growth is something you kind of keep working at day by day with faith. And what was hard for me was by the last month of my last year in law school, I didn't feel any smarter at all whatsoever. And it wasn't until I actually finished and went back to the village. I was not recruited by any means to work at a law firm. I did not have that big money job offer. And honestly, I didn't even want it. I was so brain dead that it was kind of like, you just survived the operation. You're just grateful to be alive. Don't ask me what happened. I have no idea. I'm just grateful to be alive. And that's kind of how I went back to Laie with that condition of just, I don't know how I did it, but thank you, Lord, for helping me. And when I got home, I went back to our little Haula 6 Tongan ward. And that little ward was just so grateful that I was home. And I really wasn't that much smarter, but they felt like I had something to contribute. And all of a sudden, all of that effort to just survive, what I thought was just survive, Lupe, meant something, because it meant something to my family. It meant something to the kids in the community. It meant something where no dollar was assigned to it per se. It was the confidence that I had now survived this ordeal that seemed so beyond. Now I could come back and I could say to these younger kids, you can do it. And you can do better than me. You can absolutely do it. And I was energized by that. And my motivation came back to live because I found purpose, because it meant something, again, to my people, to my family, to my village in Laie. So
And I guess, unbeknownst to you, your brother coming along, he also has his doctor or went to law school,
Yes.
right? And so,
And he did
just
do better than I did.
Yeah, exactly. So just the footsteps that you created has these effects and in your own family actually, and so I think that's cool. And shout out to Vi too, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you always in education, maybe education and also just in life, have you felt pressure, maybe from society or maybe even in your own family, to live up to the family name, knowing that your dad was, he had already set the standard and set the bar? Was there ever like pressure?
Absolutely. I do. And I think, sometimes that pressure comes across negative. But I think in the village, if we understand or remind ourselves where the pressure's coming from, we can somehow modify that pressure to be good pressure, right, so that we keep moving in a direction that's good. But there was tremendous pressure, but mostly because there had been a lot of time and money invested in giving me opportunities. And so the expectation was high that I would utilize this for good. For me personally, I cared about that. And so the pressure stayed with me. I cared about using that for good, to pay back, to do something that would help the next generation, to contribute to anything good. I cared very much about being part of that. So I have never been able to let go of that pressure. Instead, I've tried to turn that into something good that reminds me, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to work hard for something good, for something meaningful, for something that'll pay forward. And so I don't always look at that as negative. I think what it does is it actually forces me to use my time carefully and then to try and really make decisions that will maximize that good.
And also, for, now that you have kids, to pass it on to your kids. And
yeah.
I guess with the sacrifices that your parents have made. And I remember you mentioned earlier that you can see like, oh, I'm going to have to do this,
yeah.
because you did that to your parents. And so
payback.
What are some things that, that you want to pass on to your kids? Or what are some things, whether culturally or maybe even just educationally, or maybe even the strength of a person and your identity, I guess? I don't know. Maybe what are some things that you would like for your kids to learn and, for you to pass on?
I think because we were raised here in America, that Tongan heritage definitely keeps me grounded and keeps me rooted. But my children were born into a different environment with a different perspective. They are half Tongan, and the other half is Hawaiian, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, maybe even Rotuman. So I've kind of tried to give them the best of what I've gained from my Tongan heritage, which is faith in God and family, the importance and value of family, hard work, the principle of hard work, the principle of having a plan, that you then work hard for. But I speak to them not as much in terms of Tongan, Hawaiian, but more as a person, because I want them to embrace all of the cultures that they have. And I want them to, and then what I think I kind of do subconsciously is I also try to get them to value the relationships the way. They're growing up in this technology and,
Right.
generation that is very different from us. Even if we go back to Laie, Laie's grown so much.
And so the expectation to have the relationships the same way just isn't the same. And so that's kind of the reality for my children and the children of this generation, that I try to highlight the principles, which is unplug your phone, let's look eye to eye, unplug your phone, let's have family time, and then to just celebrate cultures in general. Whatever I feel is absolutely a strength in my Tongan upbringing, I definitely naturally bring that into what we do. But I also acknowledge that they're living in a different time, and I want them to take the best of all of those cultures. So one thing that, when you have parents and grandparents who have come from difficult circumstances to give us a better life, our parents coming where they spoke English as their second language, and they might not have had the support when they first came like we do. Sometimes having that story, gives us something to live for. My children are a little bit more removed from that. And so in my conversations with them, I find and realize that I need to help them find what they're living for. And sometimes in this modern world, it's a little bit harder to find. So when we lived in Tonga for 3 years, it was new. We were there when the cyclone hit. We had no electricity, no running water for almost, more than a month. And so this wasn't like a camping trip. And I am not a camp person. I'm one of those that, goes to girls' camp and then begs somebody, "Oh, please, can you take me home? I just want to go shower really fast." So we were in Tonga to have that experience. And I felt like that helped all of us, including me, to remember what to really be grateful for. We live in a developed country that you don't think twice about water not running. You don't think twice about a lot of the conveniences that make our life easier. And so finding something to instill in your children that will motivate them through the good times, through the bad times, to live for whatever that is that gets them past the hard times is probably what we're still working through. We've exposed them to the different cultures that they now claim as their culture. The Tongan is naturally probably the strongest because of me, but we're still trying to work to find that one thing that they're going to say, this is what I'm going to live for. This is what, for me, growing up in Laie, when I hated law school and when I felt like, I'm not smart enough, I just can't do this, I don't get it, I should just quit. I couldn't, because I felt like I had this village rooting for me, even though that was like 20-something years prior. That feeling of, I've got to do it for the village, I've got to do it for the team, was very strong in me because of that upbringing. And so I didn't give up. And thankfully, they didn't bulldoze me out. But in my mind, that's what was in my mind. If BYU wants to get me out of law school, they got to bring the bulldozer and remove me physically, because I'm not giving up. I do want to throw in some 20 years after graduating, I'm finally working in the legal field now, as of 2020. Now, if you told me, go to law school and then in 20 years after you start having your children, you can work in the field 20 years later, I would have been like, are you crazy? No way. But when you come from a village that has strong relational ties, you just don't give up. It's like Kogu playing that state championship game. And it's not about you anymore. It's about, I'm one person on this team, and there's my support system. Right.
and I've got to do my part to get the team to the finish line. And in life, when you have such strong ties with your village, that's what it does for you. Whether it's your village, whether it's your family, I'm trying to find what that is for my children, because they have a different cultural setting. Technology plays into relationships very differently. But I'd like them to find what that is that's going to say to them, I'm not quitting until you bulldoze me out. And right now, I'm not sure with what that is. I think they've learned from living in countries where you have and countries that have not. And we're still having that dialogue and trying to figure out what that is. I hope somewhere in all of that it comes back to their faith, their trust in God, that God is truly the creator and is in control of everything that happens around us. But that's something that we'll continue to work at with optimism.
Yeah. Where do you find your strength? Have you always considered yourself a strong person?
I'm a hopeful person. I don't see myself as strong. I rely on modern medical technology to get through all my 10 deliveries that were all terrible nightmares. But thank goodness for modern medicine, I survived. So some people think, oh, you have 10 kids? And then I say, oh, but I'm not, it's not like I'm strong at all. I don't. I go into the hospital with my eyes closed and I think, okay, if I survive this ordeal, I'll raise this baby. If not, well, I'm sure somebody, the village, they'll pick up. I don't see myself as strong, but I consider my life blessed in so many ways that I just have great confidence that what I don't have, I will find in those around me. I also have great faith that God truly is in charge. And I have absolute confidence in him. And so my attitude is, if he wants me to do it, I'm going to do it, no matter how impossible it seems. And he'll help me get there. And because of that perspective, I'm usually ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work.
I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but yeah, when before I asked you to come on, and just after watching the project that you did for the VillageMade brand, and all the females or all the people that participated, I was like, man, Lupe inspires me because of her strength and her education and just being that strong woman. And so I hope that's what people have learned, or just with the stories that you've shared and just just the life that you've lived, that people get that from what you've shared. And I appreciate all these stories. But I also wanted to get into a passion of yours that we had talked about earlier, and that passion is music. And just singing, you said that it was a balance for you, right? Mm-hmm. During your college days and during your school and yes. Music. And yeah, can you talk about your passion and where is that taking you, and how you continue to use that in your daily life, or maybe to bless others?
I have just always been drawn to music. It's always filled my heart in a way that just makes me feel happy and motivated and inspired. And so at an early age, I enjoyed singing, and my parents picked up on it and were very kind to buy a singing machine, which we thought was a TV. We did not have a TV when I was young. I have to explain, when I was born, my parents had been through their own trials of faith and refining experiences and challenges that I think when I was born, my father, he's a dreamer. He's a very hard worker, but because he is a dreamer, he will dream and work hard for the best ideals. And so I believe that when I was born,
my father, who was just finishing graduate school, I think he must have made some promises before I was born. This next child, I'm going to make sure we do the, when you get married, you have a lot of those ideals in your mind that you're going to do this for your family. Well, I was born right when my father was getting out of graduate school. He was finishing with a PhD. He'd really overcome a lot of unknown, boundaries for a Tongan islander, and not just from Tonga, but from Ewa, which is little
Even smaller
nothing,
than Tonga, yeah.
right? Where nobody expects anything from people there. And he had just accomplished this. So I think with him coming out with his big ideals, I was kind of like the child he was going to practice all these ideals. So our home was set up to prep us for those ideals, whatever those big dreams were. We had no TV. And I think, like I said, I remember these traditions we did at home consistently because he was very focused on meeting these ideals. And he was young, had all this energy. So with no TV, I learned to be very creative with my time. I entertained myself. And if anybody visited, I'm told, although I don't fully remember, that I actually announced myself to put on performances for people who visited. I think that's okay when you're 4 and 5. Right. But by the time I was in high school, my mother was still asking me to sing for the vacuum cleaner guy who was, visiting. And she would host like Polynesians do with food. And, oh, by the way, Lupe, come sing a song. So I had loved it. My parents bought this singing machine that we thought was a TV, but wasn't. And to play it, you had to play 8 tracks. That's how totally ancient I am. Like nobody even knows what 8 tracks are nowadays. And I just spent days. I'd put in the 8 track and repeat. Like if I only had 2 8 tracks, that's all I sang all day, just me and the microphone, no audience. Then we get a new 8 track. Yay! Now we have 3. Rotate the 3. And that and that's where I say I don't see myself necessarily as being strong, but music inspired me to believe. Music inspired me to see some possibilities, and the music filled me in a way that I actually felt I can do this. I was particularly drawn to Broadway music. I loved how music was part of, these movies where you're walking and then you start singing. So I suppose you have probably figured by now I'm not the typical Tongan girl in any means. But that's what I loved. And I was given a lot of freedom to do that in my house. And because we had aunts and uncles, cousins, whatever, lots of visitors, I practiced on them all the time. And maybe that's why I was so confused. Are we okay? Maybe that's why I was so confused. I had my own identity crisis because I would create this unreal world when I would listen to music. So it wasn't your typical music. It was Broadway musical music, which usually are songs you're singing about what's happening, how you're feeling. It's not the normal hip hop. And we didn't necessarily have radio. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And so when I did learn a real song, not a musical song, it was an oldie, some oldie that wasn't really played on the radio. Have you heard of Olivia Newton-John?
No.
Yeah, that tells you how old. Even Marie Osmond, one of Marie Osmond's first songs was Paper Roses, which you've probably never heard.
No.
So that was my personality, and music took me to a world of possibilities. And I've enjoyed it my whole life. I did mention when I was younger, I was a bit ambitious and actually signed up for some competitions. Right. Naturally, if you're an athlete or a musician, if you don't keep it up, those skills kind of start to go away, or they're not as
polished, is ready to go. And so as I've gotten older, I've tried to keep it up just because it's been a passion that's always made me happy. So when I was in law school, believe it or not, one of the ways that I got through those hard, dark days was taking voice lessons. Not because anybody was asking me to sing, but because I wanted to keep it in my life. And so I took private lessons. And in between trying to survive reading the textbooks at law school, I would practice. I practiced a lot. And for whoever was living with me had to endure those singing practices. When I got married and I had children, singing was one of our favorite activities. When we were in Tonga, we had no TV, no radio. You have to entertain yourself. Right. Of course, that's normal for me. I'd grown up doing that. Tonga was the perfect place to bring that back. I would actually get the kids to either sit down for dinner, and if I didn't feel like eating, I'd go and turn on my music. But now, instead of 8-tracks, I'm able to download karaoke music from the internet. So the kids would eat, or I would get them down for bed, and then I'd say, okay, close your eyes. I'm going to practice my singing. And it's just always brought a lot of peace. If I thought there was something hard we were trying to get through, music always helped bring peace, always brought that vision of hope. And I've always appreciated that. So thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah. And for the musical, was it Musical Truth, the group that you were in? I remember you guys went on. Or I remember we were in, like, when I was in the Koku Third Ward, you guys would come out, or I think it was maybe just you, but I thought that was cool that you guys, even Auntie Jolene, Can you talk about the experience? That group?
Sure. Laie is just loaded with talent. They really get the cream of the crop to come, not only to be part of BYU Hawaii, but also at the Polynesian Cultural Center. And so growing up in this little village of incredible natural talent was such a blessing in so many ways: music, dance, sports, arts and crafts, you name it, but very natural in ways that people are just born to do. And so in Laie, with all of the music talent that was there, it was always fun to be a part of that. Jolene Kanahele comes from a very musical family, and she decided to bring a couple of us. Actually, it started with one of our friends who was actually from New Zealand, Aaron Kyung, who had this idea that with all this talent, maybe we should do something about it. So he went to Jolene, who is just known for this gift of bringing music together and music people. And she agreed to try. So a couple of us got together, and she would arrange the music and she would teach it. But the way it was taught was, you sing this, da-da-da-da. You sing this, you sing that. All right, ready? Let's go. And that was it. You ran through it maybe 2 times, and it was ready to go. And there's no music. Sometimes when we would sing, people would say, hey, do you have any music? And we'd say, you have to go talk to that lady. And there's nothing written because it was her gift. She just heard it in her mind and she could just play it. Her family is just incredibly talented that way. But the other piece I want to share about Musical Truth, which is quite special, Musical Truth did not operate on how well you could sing. It operated on whatever was needed for the time requested. For example, if we were asked to sing for a missionary program, the missionary song, whatever that was chosen, whatever was the best arrangement for that, Jolene would tell us right before. Yeah. And there was it was never in our minds to say, oh, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to. It was whatever you were assigned,
that's what you did. You just trusted that that's what was best. And nobody argued. And if someone did have like bad feelings about, oh, I don't want to sing that. Why is she singing solo? You didn't stay around very long. Or Jolene would talk to you straight. Mm-hmm. And so what was amazing about that group was it operated on this absolute trust that everyone was equal, everyone was equally valued, everyone's singing abilities was all equal, and however the arrangement needed to be was going to be. Kiala Settle was also with us in that group, and we can really appreciate her success now. We've known her talent for so long. But when she comes and sings with musical truth, as we were, it's not about, well, you have a better voice and she looks nicer. And it was about whatever was going to be good for the whole. There are very few groups that I've actually worked with. And there's no jealousy. There's no ill feeling of, how come she sings more than me? Or I want to do. It just wasn't. And if that kind of started creeping in, Jolene didn't let it stay. She would deal with it. And so what we learned from that experience is truly that music is more than just one. It's the combination, it's the synergy of all these pieces that make the whole better than when it's individuals. And sometimes I've looked at that experience and asked myself, how can I create that at home so that every child feels their worth and they're okay if you're, I think that's, I'm grateful for the experience because I know what I want to work towards. And when you can get all those people to sing together, awesome. And then when you can get that to also be harmonized,
right?
Oh my goodness, So that's why Musical Truth is really special. I feel like it was more than just music. It was learning what Zion could really be like because we never argued. Caniela was part of that. Kai Raposo, who's passed on a while. Mark Piana was one of the first members. But anyone who's come at any time, it was the same principles. And I remember going back to Laie after being away for several years. I went back and I wasn't part of them singing, but I listened to them perform, and it was the same spirit that I had felt when I was singing. And that's ultimately what I took away. And that's what I think music can do for us.
I guess at the end of this, is it okay if you would share a song, or if you want to, just bless us with your talent?
They say music will bring back memories for good and bad. So I do remember reading a talk where we were advised you need to be careful what you listen to. You want to make sure it's the right music that inspires you. Well, Jolene's music has always inspired all of us. But I just think of all those musicians at PCC,
Exactly.
Those who were there in the beginning, those who are there now. And even when you think, oh, how are we going to continue our music after so-and-so passes on? Well, the next generation, they are amazing. And they do. They come in and they fill in, and all that good stuff keeps going. Probably a song that you've never heard. Have you heard of the song Star Maker?
No. When did you first come across this song, or is it something that you've always?
Yeah, I'm looking at all these oldies. My poor kids, they always have to endure it. But they think it's funny. Some people go run 20 miles when they're stressed, or others
People
just
have different ways of
explode.
coping,
Yeah.
and
This is my
yours,
stress release. Find a good oldie song and sing it. And I take liberties with my family because they're used to me. And I used to do this when my grandmother was there.
because I didn't speak Tongan very well and she didn't really speak English, I would just say, Grandma, sit down. I'm going to sing for you. And she's, you just go like this. And then I just practice. I'm going to try this one because, we've been talking about just dreams and moving on. This is a song, Star Maker, that actually, since I'm talking about Jolene, was sung by her sister. When we were in elementary, they had a star search competition, and Jolene's sister is Tina Kanahele Ishibashi. Ishibashi? I might have said that wrong. She actually sang this in the competition. So in our local district, she won, and I was a runner-up.
Okay.
And this was her song that she sang. I do no justice to it, of course, 40 years later. I still remember her amazing voice with this song. But I've always loved it. It actually comes from the movie Fame, which is a musical, which I've actually never seen the movie. So my connection to this song is Tina Kanahele with this huge belting voice when we were in elementary. We both went to the state finals at the Waikiki Shell. And the song I sang was a Melissa Manchester. You've never heard of her. Sang the song Coming from the Rain. I kind of laugh. I have no idea where I got my songs from. And I just thought, I remember going there and thinking, where did she get that beautiful song? Well, 40 years later, I found it on karaoke. So I started singing it to my kids. I'd like to share maybe a verse with you. Well, when I was in Laie, awesome place to grow up. But one of the challenges of the village is that we all kind of give each other our opinions, whether it's asked or not, right? So once we label, okay, Lupe likes to sing, Lupe wants to be a singer, well, then everybody throws in their opinion. That's just how the village works.
Right.
And I remember being in elementary, still being quite young, and having these opportunities to practice my singing and perform at different community functions. And I remember hearing feedback of people saying, she's not that good. So-and-so is better, and so-and-so is better. And one of the challenges of the village is that sometimes if we listen to that, we actually might believe it and stop doing something that we may actually have potential for or that we enjoy. And so for me, I never listened to those comments. I just decided, well, I love music, so I'm going to just keep practicing. And as I've gotten older, like I said, it's really been the stress reliever that's helped me through challenges, trials, and it just keeps the hope alive in me. Not that I have to be a big famous singer. In fact, when I see the famous singers, I just watch them sing and go, okay, and that's why you are not a professional singer. But I appreciate that I've held on to it because the most important place that I share it with really is at home. And I love it. And when you have no money, which is it's been my plight for most of my life raising kids, we've always had to stretch the dollar. Music always fills in. And so I just wanted to say, I think with all the strengths that come with the village, we also should probably be careful not to believe everything, be true to who we are. And that's the perspective that comes from living in this great country. That's what America offers to everyone is, does it matter to you? If it matters to you, then don't worry about that. That question where you talked about bringing both is bringing the best of both worlds, is where if we could be true to ourselves, but then still care about the community. And eventually, because they are loving people, if you love it and it makes you happy, at least what I've seen in my village experiences, the village will come around and they'll share your joy.
And that's A question I usually ask is, what do we have to unlearn as a culture? And you just answered that perfectly. Maybe some things we have to unlearn is holding our tongue, or not listening to
Yeah.
people, or just these criticisms, or maybe even just their opinions, not even criticism, because it probably won't come. It's not coming from a bad place,
Right.
Just but okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was just my 2 cents, but
That's exactly right. And then, as we get older, the people that we really, really want to make an impact for me right now, it's my children.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you can look back and you can say, I'm so glad I didn't give up, because now I have this to share with.
So it makes it all worth it.
Yep, absolutely.
That's the moment. Yeah.
So this is a song that, goes back to our Laie days.
Okay.
And let's, Can I just sing into this and you're gonna, What if I get too loud? You'll adjust
Nope,
it?
you're good. Yeah.
Here, as I watch the ships go by, I'm rooted to my shore. I keep asking myself why, and if there's more on the other side. Here, as I see the friends I thought I made, a little bit crazed to know, but now we''t outgrown one another. Star maker, dream breaker, soul taker, we're happy now. Now, when I see the things I want, I can take the things I see, but I keep asking myself why, and if there ain't just a little bit more for me. Here, when it's time to count the cost, I keep measuring what I've lost and wondering if you knew it would all wind up with you. Star maker, dream breaker, soul taker, we're happy now. Here, as I watch the time go by, how I'd like to sail away, leaving all my past behind, but I know I'd only last for a couple of days. Here stands everything I thought I made. It's the only life I've known, and I can't even call it my own. I've got no home, I belong to you, my star maker, dream breaker, soul taker, we're happy now. We're so happy now. Star maker, dream breaker, soul taker, we're happy now. Ooh. Okay, malo laie.
Wow.
Ah, Well, nothing like Tina Kanahele, but the song will bring back memories of those old days. Thanks for letting me share. Appreciate it.
On that note, man, thank you for your time. Again, being so kind with your time and also sharing your talent and the song and also your story. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the VillageMade podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you later.